In the United Kingdom, an estimated 112,853 children are reported missing every year. In the United States, an estimated 460,000 children are reported missing every year. These are estimates and only includes those who are recorded as being born. The vast majority of these lost souls will be found. Many will have run away from complex environments at home. Others will have fallen into gang life, drugs or crime. But sitting beyond these accounts, we appear to have an age-old satanic agenda that involves the sacrifice of innocents through the worship of a global cult's belief in a bloodthirsty deity they call their God. Some call this Moloch or Baal, Kronos or Saturn. Others have compared this being to the biblical Yahweh and the Gnostic Demiurge. Mainstream historians have tried to label this a satanic panic, whilst completely dismissing the evidence that wealthy ancient bloodlines have been practicing these rituals for thousands of years. From ancient Egypt to Babylon to Rome, onto the Hollywood Hills and elite-owned islands, sadly this practice appears to continue to this day. But why? What do they believe they gain from this most darkest of deceptions? And what do they believe their punishment will be if they refuse to take part in the ritual? Researching and discussing these topics takes a toll on the individual. These are not the type of stories you tend to want to spend a Saturday evening researching. So with that in mind, you need a little space to process this dark information. This space we found in the beautiful Norfolk seafront of Haysborough. It was here on May the 1st, Beltane, a significant date for discussing this information, that I met with David Icke, one of the world's leading researchers and exposers of the satanic and ritualistic practices of the world's most famous faces. Away from the distractions of the World Wide Web, the coming smart cities, and a planet engulfed by information, we sat down near the turning of the tide to investigate not only the rituals themselves, but also the very nature of reality, and in turn, who or what these ancient practices are believed to serve.
So we're out here in the wilderness, in the middle of nowhere.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So we can concentrate on these very disturbing themes and terms, but we can't really move forward till we understand the nature of the place we're in right now, and then go on to explain where they might be tapping into with these rituals themselves. So where are we? What are we doing here?
Well, the problem is with understanding the world is the nature of reality itself is kept from us, and I would say absolutely systematically. Because once you realize what this reality is, then the so-called paranormal, which would otherwise be, that can't happen, mate, that's impossible, starts to be understandable. So if you look through the the education system and what have you, and the media and all these sources of information, they don't go into the nature of reality. I mean, this is the thing that I always, looked around and thought, why don't many people actually want to know, what is this place? Who are we? What are we doing here? And when you start going down that road, suddenly the pennies are dropping, I mean, like a banking system, pennies dropping, that makes you see the world as it really is. And so much that would otherwise be impossible to understand and to conceive it could be happening, suddenly makes perfect sense. So, for instance, I would say that children at the earliest age that they can grasp it should be told that when they look through their eyes, they're only seeing a tiny band of frequency, and anything beyond it they can't see. And that actually infinity, in all its forms and facets, exists in the same space that we're sitting in now. So I'm looking at you and I'm looking at this room, and what I'm seeing is what exists within the band of frequency that my sight senses can perceive. And that band of frequency is absolutely, ridiculously, ludicrously small. So according to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum, which is basically human reality, is 0.005% of what exists in the universe in terms of energy in all its forms. And visible light, which is the only band of frequency we can see, everything we're looking at now is within the band of frequency of visible light, is a smear of the 0.005%. So basically humans are blind. So immediately when people say, well, you're saying that there's other entities manipulating human society, why can't we see them? Because you can see virtually damn all, mate. That's why. They operate outside of that band of frequency we call visible light. And once you realize that basic fact of reality, suddenly, like I say, the paranormal starts to not be so para, right?
Yeah.
So you hear people, they say, I woke up in bed one night and there was this entity at the end of the bed, and it kind of came out of nowhere, and then it just disappeared. Firstly, if we don't understand that, none of the paranormal makes sense. And how can you have satanic rituals to some other dimensional gods if you don't appreciate that? If you think that this world basically is all there is and the solidity of the world is real and all that, then you're going to dismiss any of this stuff, because to your perception it's just not possible. You're going to dismiss any of this stuff because to your perception it's just not possible.
And this is what they're tapping into with these rituals, and where I kind of would describe it is if someone asked you where did you come from before you were born, and where'd you go when it's over. You obviously were somewhere and go somewhere else. There is another. So these rituals, and the reason why we're here today in the middle of sunny Norfolk in the middle of nowhere, is that it's May the 1st. It's Beltane. Now, I'll just read something about from one of your books. So this is the biggest secret. This goes back to the late 90s. So you wrote about Beltane. The Beltane ritual, later performed in Britain, which staggeringly still goes on today by the Druids on May the 1st, May Day, involved the burning of children in the belly of a huge wicker effigy of man. Now, we've seen some of this kind of activity go on at Bohemian Grove with the cremation of Care, the Moloch and the burning and passing through the fire, and these things. So this was inherent from the Babylonians when the Brotherhood expanded across Europe. Indeed, it may well be that the reptilians had once based themselves in what is now the United Kingdom and Ireland, before they moved their main focus to the Near East and Africa. So this is an age-old practice, and that's what I don't think people are grasping too much. This is nothing new, is it?
No, I mean, when I started investigating this, it was an obvious fact that none of this stuff that's going on today has just begun. So it had to be going on way back in what we call history. And therefore I thought the ancients must have mentioned it. And of course, they didn't just mention it, they practiced it. One of the interesting things that really started penny dropping for me was I looked at all the rituals that went on, sacrifice of people, sacrifices of young virgins to the gods, young virgins being code for children, and they were all done by the ancients. In those days it was done openly. And then as I uncovered more and more about what I call the global cult, this network of secret societies behind world events, and I realized that the major players and a lot of the not so major players were actually practicing Satanists. And what do Satanists do? I've talked to Satanists all over the world, former Satanists who've described to me what goes on. And they do these rituals, sacrifice rituals, literally, still children today, to the gods. So immediately you've got, okay, the ancients used to sacrifice people, children to the gods, and the elite today do that. So what does that tell you? It tells you there's an unbroken stream, first of all openly done because it was acceptable then, and now in secret because it's not, to the general population anyway. But it tells you something else. The gods they were sacrificing to are the same gods these people are sacrificing to today. And so my next question was, okay, the ancients were sacrificing to make an offering to the gods. My question was, so what do the gods get out of it then? Right? What do they get out of this stuff? And then you start to really get deep into what is happening.
For thousands of years, this now global cult has been sacrificing adults and children to the so-called gods. So who are they, and what do they want?
There are entities just outside of human sight which are feeding off low vibrational human energy. It's their sustenance, it's their energetic source. And the reason it's low vibrational is because these entities are low vibrational. So if you think of the old analog system of radio stations and television channels, you got on a certain radio station because the dial was on that wavelength, and so you got it. And it's the same. And if you were on another wavelength, you didn't get that radio station. And it's the same with the frequency on which these entities, people like the Christian religion and others call them demons, that they're operating on. Their frequency relates to low vibrational human energy, particularly emotional energy, all based around the core state of fear. When we are manipulated into those states, we are giving off an energy. This is well known by mainstream science, that every time we think and every time we feel an emotion, we are generating a frequency that relates to that emotion and that thought. So fear and all these other emotions I'm talking about are very low, slow frequencies. Joy, love, gratitude are very high, fast wavelength frequencies. these entities are not interested in that because they can't absorb it. What they're interested in is low vibrational emotional energy. So what they've done is created a world, which I say is a simulation, getting that I'm sure, which is manipulating human perceptual emotional states into low vibrational frequency states.
But why children mostly? Like, why do they specifically target children?
Well, this is something else I've picked up over the years, that before what we call puberty, the pre-puberty period of a child's life, they're operating on a certain wavelength frequency. And then puberty comes along and there's a shift in that frequency as they're starting to enter what we call adulthood. And we experience that frequency change as a chemical change, a hormonal change. But actually, what the hormonal and the chemical is an expression of is the frequency change. What these entities want is the child's energy before that shift takes place. That's why they target children. That's one reason they target children. There are others, but that's a core foundation reason. You take a child, or you take an adult, because they sacrifice adults as well, and you put them in this terrifying situation where they're surrounded by these people in robes and hoods, and there's candles and colors and chants and all this stuff. And you build it up, you build up the terror. And as they are feeling more and more terror, which is a very, very powerful, for obvious reasons, emotional energy.
So you're saying that the rituals itself, they're theatrics to heighten change the
it's to heighten
feeling
the
of the
terror.
child. Yeah.
To heighten the terror. And what they're also doing is, with their chants, which are frequencies, you know, what are words? What is language? They're vibrational fields generated from the vocal cord. And so all these different elements of the ritual are about creating a frequency vibrational environment. That's for another reason I'll come to why they do that. But what the key thing is that they are generating more and more extreme terror in the victim. And eventually, when they come to the point of the sacrifice, that terror is at its height.
Yeah.
And what happens when the body is in a state of terror is an adrenaline is released into the blood. You would understand why that is. And so what happens is the Satanists in the visible light realm, the five sense realm, the human realm, they drink that blood with the adrenaline in it, and to them it's a drug. It's a drug, it gives them a high, and there are many other reasons that they do it.
We're talking about adrenochrome.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's one of the names that they give to it. But while they're doing that, that's how they're consuming the terror of the victim via the blood.
Yep.
The entities in another reality outside of visible light, outside of the human reality, they're feeding off the energy coming off the sacrificial victim, that energy of terror. That's the offering to the gods. The gods are absorbing that. And it's a very concentrated form of what they're absorbing as a matter of course from the low vibrational emotional states of the population. And I've talked to Satanists over the years, former Satanists, who say that in the major rituals, the energetic environment that is generated is such that these entities can actually morph into this reality where you can actually see them. They can't stay for very long, but they do morph into this reality to become part of the ritual. And one of the reasons, or a key reason, that these rituals are done at the same place over and over and over again is because the constant repetition of that ritual thins out the vibrational wavelength difference between this reality and the reality where these entities are.
So say somewhere like Jerusalem now, with Gaza happening, and obviously the genocide in Gaza, that's thinning out the atmosphere for possibly, we will talk about later what the possible plan is for that, but a place where they could come into this reality. The amount of wars beyond there, how they call it the Holy Land still, is beyond my understanding.
Yeah, well, you raise a very, very important point, Rich, here, because, you know, once you understand this dynamic where these entities outside of human sight are feeding off this low vibrational human energy, world events take on a very different light. For instance, a war is not like a world war. It's not just people fighting with each other. The act of fighting, the act of fear of being defeated, all the people back home who have loved ones doing the fighting, who are terrified that their loved one won't come home, they're all generating
Just dragging them in.
massive amounts of low vibrational emotional energy and mental energy. And so from that point of view, a war is suddenly a massive global, in terms of world wars, sacrificial ritual.
It is hard to get your head around how anyone could commit these horrific acts against anyone, let alone children. How can anyone truly believe in the moral supremacy of a god or gods that demand the sacrifice of a child to appease them? It scrambles the logical mind. Perhaps then, these Satanists are of another mind, an ancient mind, the reptilian mind of the R-complex.
You've mentioned in the quote, obviously I'm well known for talking about reptilian entities, because these entities just outside of human sight, in what we call the astral dimension or fourth dimension, if you take this to be the third dimension, a lot of them do take a reptilian form, which is why the whole reptilian theme goes way back into ancient times.
Do you think that they take a reptilian form because they understand the psychology of humans, that possibly is the most terrifying form they can take?
Yeah, I remember the great Credo Mutwa, the Zulu shaman and historian, who I spent a lot of time with over the years. He said to me, if you want to understand, when I first met him, he said, if you want to understand the Illuminati, which is the name he gave to this global cult, as I call it, study the reptile. And I did. You know, I went to crocodile farms and alligator farms and what have you. What they did was they would do demonstrations. So I watched one in Australia where this guy got in this open pen with these crocodiles, and he had a stick in his hand. And he said, when I do this, the crocodile will do that. And every time he did it, the crocodile did exactly what he said it would do. The reptilian genetics is like a computer program. It's like a software program. And I say these reptilians, not necessarily all reptilians in all infinite existence, but those I'm talking about, I say they're AI. They're a very advanced form of AI, well beyond anything that we see even now in the expanding AI of the human world. They're a form of AI, and they're extremely predictable, and they have no emotion. And to bring together the whole reptilian concept and what I've said about the survival mechanism, the survival mode, which is very much about producing low vibrational energy, am I going to survive? It comes down to something which actually scientists call the R-complex, or the reptilian brain. And when I came across this, I thought the chances of that being a coincidence are, you know, relatively low, because the back of the brain here, this brainstem here, it's called by science the reptilian brain. And this is where our survival response comes from. So what psychologists call fight or flight, where you're in danger, do I smack the guy or run? That's all coming from the reptilian brain. Things like road rage, they come from the reptilian brain. And what the reptilian brain does is it doesn't think, it reacts. It's all about survival. It's scanning the environment for threats to survival. And like I say, not just physical survival, relationships, paying the mortgage, all that stuff. And what is that doing? It's generating this low vibrational anxiety and fear, which is what these entities feed off. Yeah. And I do think that the reptilian element of the human brain is not there by accident, it's there by design.
Well, no, it would actually fit in with the matrix kind of plug in the brain side. That's where you're plugged in from, your CPU, your main computer system. And
well, that's interesting, isn't it? What you mentioned there.
That's
if you look at the symbolism of the Matrix movies,
yeah.
Where were they plugged into the Matrix?
Straight
the back of the neck, the reptilian brain.
Exactly, and that's where they're pumping it into and gleaning out. It's a two-way system.
We're in a jail we deny we're in. And there are jailers we deny exist. And we call it freedom.
Yes, sir. Yes. You know, Mr. David, one of the reasons why I've joined forces with you is because I have serious reason to believe, and I will repeat these words until somebody shuts my mouth in death. I have serious reason to believe that on this planet, things are coming to a head, and our invisible jailers are going to fight tooth and nail to prevent it.
We're going to be free, and we are, then we need to know all there is to know, and not just that which the few want us to think is the world, when a very different world is unfolding all around us every day.
So when we're talking about the reptilian brain, the first thing that pops to mind is, literally, no pun intended, is Carlos Castaneda and the guys that he was around that gave him this information. You have a quote from the book,
yeah.
The Trap, and I know it's a quote that you've also put in other books like The Children of Matrix and The Big Secret, but this, absolutely, 1991 this came out, and this completely describes what you've just said.
Yeah, and the thing is that, like I say, if only you know it, then why do only me know it? So you're looking for other people, necessarily about the big picture, but you're looking for other people that have got elements of the picture that correspond with what you're uncovering. So there's a kind of a cross-reference going on,
yeah.
where people in ancient times are saying the same things as what you're saying now from your own research. And there's a correlation starts to emerge. And this is a quote from a book of Carlos Castaneda, who wrote a lot about his interactions with a Central American shaman called Don Juan Matus. And when I first, because I'd come to the conclusions that we're discussing here before I read this.
So before you read that,
yeah.
So you found that and a light bulb went, hang on a minute.
So,
yeah.
And this has happened to me a lot.
That's really important, though, because a lot of people might think, well, he's just repeating
yeah.
that. Yeah,
this has happened to me a lot. Well, whether people accept it is up to them. I came across the Nag Hammadi documents that were found in 1945 in an earthen jar that go back to about 400 AD from the Gnostic belief system. And that confirmed an enormous amount that I'd already concluded. So this was another example of that. And Don Juan Matus was a Central American shaman who was talking about the fact that what he called the predators or the flyers, these non-human entities, were manipulating human society. And given what we've just been discussing, this quote is, like you say, it's devastating. He says, talking of these entities, they took us over because we are food to them, and they squeeze us mercilessly because we are their sustenance. This is the low vibrational energy. Just as we rear chickens in coops, the predators rear us in human coops, human eros. Therefore, their food is always available to them. They have to keep us in these low vibrational mental and emotional states, because then we're generating their sustenance, their food. He says, in order to keep us obedient, meek and weak, the predators engage themselves in a stupendous maneuver. Stupendous, of course, from the point of view of a fighting strategist, horrendous maneuver from the point of view of those who suffer it. They gave us their mind. Now that can certainly relate in part to the reptilian brain, but they gave us their mind. He goes on. The predator's mind is baroque, contradictory, morose, filled with the fear of being discovered any minute now.
Yeah.
So let's just put that into the perspective of what we're talking about. They have to create a low vibrational energy based on these states of perception and being to generate their sustenance, because they are in that frequency, right? So what does that mean? They must be in those states.
Yes.
Right? So this is the thing I've been trying to get across to people all these years. These people are not omnipotent gods. They're a bunch of prats, actually. They're moronic.
And they're terrified.
And they're terrified of being discovered, because why? When they're discovered and people realize that their low vibrational mental and emotional states are being manipulated for this end, then they have the choice, the possibility of breaking out into something else from that realization, and then the food source is gone. So they're terrified that people will wait. So I don't want anyone waking up. So I don't want any people in states of peace and love and harmony, balance. They don't want that because they don't generate the energy. And so it all starts to fit together once the dots start to connect. And Don Juan Matus goes on. What I'm saying is that what we have against us is not a simple predator. It is very smart and organized. Yes, it is, but let's put the smart into perspective.
Cunning.
It's smart not because it is omnipotently intelligent, but because it manipulates the human world and human society to put humans in a fraction of their potential for intelligence and creativity and all these things. So it goes on, he goes on, it follows a methodical system to render us useless. It's a methodical system to keep us in ignorance of what they know. Yeah. This is why in the human realm we have what I call the global cult, which is a global network of secret societies which at its core is interacting with these entities.
Which you call the spider.
I call these entities the spider in the center of the global web, yeah. And the whole foundation of this global cult through control of the education system, in fact they created it, not least in America through the Rockefellers, through control of the media, control of information. They suppress this information that they have and they don't want us to have, and they emphasize a load of nonsensical information. To what? to keep us in ignorance. He goes on, and this is key. Man, the magical being that he is destined to be, is no longer magical. He's an average piece of meat. There are no more dreams for man, but the dreams of an animal who is being raised to be a piece of meat, trite, conventional, imbecilic. And this is the point, the magical being he is destined to be. We, the true I, are consciousness, a state of infinite, eternal awareness. And what this manipulation has sought to do, and has achieved, but people are starting to, quote, wake up now, transfer or transform our sense of identity, our sense of the I, from I am all there is, has been, and ever can be, having a brief human experience, to I am the human experience.
Well, that's why I want to point out next, when we get to the next part, is the religious side, because the cognitive dissonance here is mind-blowing when they can see one thing for what it is, part of the agenda, and then completely miss another, probably willingly sometimes, but there is a lot of cognitive dissonance there, especially when it comes to religion, like the Christian faith. We look at the Catholic Church, clearly there's some ancient alien, maybe ancient gods, archons possibly, there's some feathered serpents there. We're looking at people like the Dagon or the Dogon tribe. Obviously these guys have been here before, but how are they, like, the religious side baffles me because it's so blatant.
Religion is basically, it's a barricade. Now, let's relate religion and what it does to what these entities want. People say that there's lots of different religions. Well, it does appear like that. But when you break them down to their foundations, they're basically the same blueprint. And it's a blueprint that suits the entities. So every religion has its God, its version of God, which the congregation is supposed to worship. And then they have a man, usually a man, sometimes a woman these days, wearing what I would call fancy dress at the front of the church or the synagogue or the temple or the mosque, telling the congregation what God wants them to do, because they've been appointed by fellow humans, so they must know what God wants.
Or the lodge, the Freemasons.
Yeah,
lodge,
exactly. So, and so you've got the congregation is always subordinate. They're subordinate to the God, and they're overwhelmingly subordinate to the middleman or middlewoman who is interpreting what God says that they should do. And people therefore have a collective belief system which they cannot question to the extent that the belief system is put under serious scrutiny, because the religious hierarchy will react to that.
But isn't it that the higher-ups, let's take the British Royals, Sigil of Saturn on the Balmoral, they're clearly worshipping someone else than the everyday man who's possibly Catholic or Protestant, but the bloodline royals will know exactly who they're worshipping.
Yeah, so you have those that are part of this global cult who are worshipping the entities in their rituals, but of course in public they can't say, oh yeah, I'm a Satanist, I'm the king, I'm the queen, I'm the Satanist. They've got to act as if they are following the religion. And so, you know, outwardly, the British royal family are Christian believers. They're not. I mean, you know, you haven't got to do that much research, and if you've been around for 35 years like me, you've done a hell of a lot of research that shows that they are worshipping a very different God to the one that Christians think they're worshipping. But you've got this belief system, this groupthink, and if you deviate from the groupthink, then you're out of the tribe, you're out of the club, if you like. And people's desire, not least through fear and insecurity, to be part of the group, part of the tribe, means that they will conform and shut off their questioning to stay part of the group. And like I say, when you have these different religious belief systems, it's the perfect situation to play them off against each other to divide and rule.
Do you think, like I do, that all these religions are ultimately worshipping the same satanic god without them knowing?
100%, Rich. You know, when I look at the Old Testament God, I see a bloodthirsty tyrant. I don't see a loving God.
Well, look at the Passover. Oh, what he did there. It wasn't
Yeah,
particularly
because
nice, was he?
this loving God passed over the Jewish people and didn't kind of kill their firstborn, but the Egyptians were a fair game. It's nonsensical. There's so many things that are nonsensical about the whole thing. I mean, if people would only get over the cognitive dissonance, and you know, naivety and cognitive dissonance are really fundamental human diseases. Cognitive dissonance is to believe two things that are, or even more, which are obviously contradictory while believing both to be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And the only way you can do that is by ignoring the contradictions.
Which sounds a bit like mind control and MK Ultra there, a little bit. It's compartmentalised.
It is absolutely a form of mind control. I mean, people think, oh, mind control, that sounds kind of deep. It's not. It's, I get you to think what I want you to think. That's all mind control is.
That it's quite logical.
Yeah. So you have this cognitive dissonance where, well, I mean, the Old Testament and the New Testament God, and I have problems with the New Testament God as well, because he's sacrificing his own begotten son. I mean, what's all that about?
Yep. Another sacrifice?
Another sacrifice, yeah. You know, it's just there again. But if you take the totality of what's said about the New Testament God, the God of love and all that stuff, well, don't love your only begotten son very much if you do that. And oh, cool, that's controversial, isn't it? But then you compare that in totality with the Old Testament God. They're clearly not the same entity that they're talking about. Certainly not the same state of being. When I came across the Nag Hammadi documents, the people haven't come across them. They were found in this earthen jar in Nag Hammadi, 75, 80 miles north of Luxor in Egypt, in 1945.
Which is important. 1945 to 1948 is a really pivotal time.
Yeah, and they they're estimated to have been put in that jar maybe around in the period of 400 AD, which fits with the destruction over different periods of the Great or Royal Library of Alexandria in Egypt, yeah, which was overseen by the Gnostic belief system and was a great depository of ancient documents and ancient knowledge, ancient texts, which were destroyed. Well, a lot of them weren't destroyed, but a lot of them were destroyed by the Roman Church, and you'll find that a lot of those documents that weren't destroyed are now in the vaults of the Vatican.
Yeah.
And they saw, the Gnostics, they believed that this reality was created by not the God, but by this entity which they call Yaldabaoth. And Yaldabaoth, and the way that's described, also called the demiurge in some descriptions as well, relates to the way Satan and the devil is described.
And Yahweh.
Yahweh, the Old Testament God. And then if you go to Islam, they talk about Shaitan or Iblis.
Yep.
Satan, Shaitan, hello? And they have the idea of some demonic supporting cast of this devil, Yaldabaoth, Shaitan. In Christianity, they call them demons.
Yep.
In Islam, they call them jinn. Gnostics called them archons, which is a Greek word meaning rulers, and so on and so forth. It goes on in different
Genie.
different
comes into
cultures.
it. Granting you a wish, genie.
Genies, yeah. I mean that comes from genie. Wasn't there a song called Gin Genie?
I think there was. Gin is quite a good idea.
And so there you have these common themes, and when I'm researching, I'm always looking for patterns. I'm not looking for things so much, I mean I do, but not so much of areas of disagreement. I'm looking for areas of agreement, and it's amazing how many you find. And this whole theme that we're talking about of a non-human force operating in the hidden, manipulating human society, it's a common theme. It's a common theme all over the world. And these divisions of religions, we believe this, we believe that, we believe that, they miss how much they have in common and how much agreement there is between them. And where that agreement fuses is in this whole arena that we're talking about. They just don't see it.
With such a vast network of a conspiracy that goes back thousands of years, how is it that they are able to hide what they are doing in plain sight? Surely there would be those speaking out about this on a daily basis. Who are the keepers of the ritual? The keepers of the elite?
So it says, for the Satanists, the severe consequences of revealing secrets or refusing to carry out an order are not threats, they are promises. The Illuminati and the satanic networks play their people and put their people in the major positions of power in all areas they need to control to prevent proper investigations. And in terms of the mainstream alternative media, and MAM as you call it, they put them in there as well. It's all about blocking it, isn't it? Are these people definitely afraid of being compromised or being revealed to be compromised as well?
Well, I think it's kind of a minefield to pick through, because you have in all these areas a few people who will knowingly be manipulating, and then you have other people who are subordinate to those or influenced by those, who simply won't know what's going on and will do what the cult wants simply because they don't know what's going on. So, for instance, if you look at a police force, all you need to do, or any other organization, all you need to do is control the positions that decide hire and fire.
Yep.
And policy. And that is a very few people in any organization. So you have control of the person at the top, maybe, and usually yes, and they will dictate the policy running down the hierarchy. And the hierarchy will then go into this process of whoever's above them in the hierarchy tells them what to do, and they do it, and then they tell those below them to do what they've told them to do, that they've been told by them to do, and so it goes on. And so if you can hijack the hire and fire positions from the top, you're not only dictating policy, you're dictating who comes in and who goes out. And so I've watched over decades now the police force transform.
That sort of implies that some of these guys don't actually know what's going on further up, but they are scared in one way or another.
Well, some are scared and some are ignorant. And I suppose if you break it down deeply enough, they're all scared in their own way. The point to make is that the Satanists, the cultists, don't have to control anything like every position in an organization to control the organization. And it's the same with the mainstream alternative media. I started out in 1990 consciously on this journey. My whole life has been about it when I look back, but consciously from then. And there was no alternative media. It was just a few of us in disparate people in different parts of the world, and not many, who were seeing that there was a conspiracy going on. And then it grew, and eventually, not least after 9/11, it started to expand and expand. And it ended up with the COVID period. Yeah. And those that had the experience of seeing how it worked, when COVID broke, you could see that it was a scam. And what I've seen since COVID is a lot of those people who bought the hoax, bought the lockdowns, bought the virus, and a lot of them bought the vaccine, fake vaccine, that's not a vaccine by previous criteria.
Yeah.
They've actually taken over the alternative media.
They have, yes.
And a lot of them, ironically, have become COVID dissident heroes when they bought the whole shebang. And people like me who exposed it from basically the start, from the spring of 2020, they've been marginalized, so what I call the MAMs, the mainstream alternative media takeover, can come in. The big turning point was when Elon Musk took over Twitter and turned it into X.
Yeah.
He became, and still is as we speak, a mainstream media god, a hero. Oh, Elon's saving the world. And he has become this pivotal figure which is basically orchestrating the lower ranks, if you like. So, for instance, on Twitter X, Musk is now the kingmaker.
Yeah.
And in this way, if he retweets, and if it even is most of the time him, retweets under his Musk logo, someone else in the mainstream alternative media, it guarantees that person millions, sometimes tens of millions of views. It's a massive promotion of that person. So he's the kingmaker.
But didn't yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I was filming this, or the day before, he released an image of Tesla, a new badge, and it was the pentagram. It was an upside down, inverted pentagram.
Well, what you see is you see the little hints. He's almost laughing at us. You know, when he went to some fancy dress party and he dressed in a satanic garb, yeah. and yes, he showed this picture. No comment. He just posted this picture of like a Tesla logo, and it was shot at a particular angle which turned the five-pointed star into a inverted pentagram. Now, the inverted pentagram, of course, yeah. as he will know, absolutely he will know, is an inverted pentagram because it is a symbol, a classic symbol of Satanism, which is an inverted religion. And this is an important point. it's not an accident that Satanism uses inverted pentagrams as its main logo and inverted crosses. It's because what this cult does, what these demonic entities do, is they invert everything. So we live in an inverted society. Everything is upside down, like the education system doesn't educate, it programs. And you look at all the, like the health system doesn't deal in health, it deals in ill health, actually.
Childcare system doesn't look after children.
Yeah, exactly. The whole thing is inverted. What it's meant to do, it does the opposite.
Yeah.
And this is all Satanism manifesting. Wherever you see inversion, you're looking at the satanic principle. The alternative media, particularly in America, has always been dominated by Christianity. Okay. But what's happening is those who have been like followers of Christianity, but it's not been at the forefront of everything. Suddenly it's at the forefront. And then you're getting others that have never had that background, who are suddenly converting, and not least converting to Roman Catholicism. Now, Roman Catholicism is basically the Church of Babylon relocated. And the Babylonian Trinity became the Christian Trinity through the Roman Church. What's in the Bible was basically decided by the Roman Church. And it was a Roman emperor called Constantine the Great at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, who basically decided what Christians should believe to this day.
And we had King James rewriting the Bible and then sacrificing lots of young virgins he believed were witches, obviously in Scotland. So
yeah, the whole story is grotesque, frankly, and people won't like that, but you speak your truth and people...
But it is what it is. It's undeniable. It happened.
It is what it is. And so I've looked at this and I'm thinking, why are all these people... We've got a Dutch activist called Eva Vlandingenbroek, who's converted to Catholicism, Roman Catholicism. We've got Jordan Peterson's wife, who has converted to Catholicism. We've got Candace Owens, who's converted to Catholicism. And we've got Russell Brand, who's doing videos of the Rosary and talking about being baptized and promoting and
whilst wearing a Saturn logo on his T-shirt, by the way.
Yeah, and promoting a prayer app called Hallow, which is a Roman Catholic, it says here, prayer app, which is funded by Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel has got the intelligence community and the Pentagon running through his veins of his body and down to his DNA. So all these things, you go, what's actually going on? Because the cognitive dissonance is extraordinary. What you do is you make your name by saying, here we have inversion again. You make your name by saying we must have freedom. And then you convert to a church which has a history of grotesque mass slaughter and torture of those that committed the crime of having a different opinion to the Roman Church.
Child abuse as well.
Oh, the child abuse networks, of course, are legendary within the Roman Catholic Church.
Well, this is what I wonder, and I'm not saying a specific person that's compromised, but you've got Jeffrey Epstein, obviously, Lolita Express, Lolita being a soft porn movie that come out in the 70s with young girls. We have Jimmy Savile closely connected to the British Royals, Peter Ball, who was a paedophile bishop that Charles was close to. How far do you think that these guys are up the pecking order? Because like someone like Musk, he is answering to someone.
Musk is a gopher.
Yeah.
So, okay. What is going on? And we talk about perception control and mind control. What's the ultimate mind control? It is to connect the human brain to artificial intelligence, so artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. So humanity becomes a hive mind in which its perceptions, thus its emotional state, thus the louche that it produces, is dictated en masse ultimately from a central point. And to achieve that, you need to create an artificial electromagnetic cloud, as they're calling it, that covers every inch of the planet. Thus, every human being, no matter where they are, can be connected to it. And what is Musk doing? He is through SpaceX, which is actually a Pentagon NASA operation. He's the front man.
The pentagram there again.
Yeah. So SpaceX is leading the way in putting up. He boasts about it on Twitter X all the time. More rockets have gone up to launch low orbit satellites that are beaming this cloud, 4G, 5G, 6G, 7G to come. The way that we are supposed to be connected to the cloud is through nanotechnology. And I saw an interview with Musk in which he was challenged by the interviewer, which is rare, who said, look, why would anyone want to have a piece of the skull taken away for one of your implants to go in? And he said, oh yeah, but you wouldn't necessarily have to do that. You could put it in through the veins. You could put it in through the veins, Elon. Yeah, you mean it like in the COVID fake vaccine with the self-replicating nanotechnology that has been put in via those fake vaccines.
Yeah, I bet you got told off after letting that one slip.
Yeah, so that just gives you an indication that he's a seller of concepts. Not necessarily everything is that he's involved in is how it's meant to be, but he's selling the concept. And yet, people who talk about freedom, they talk about not giving your power away, they're buying it all.
This satanic agenda has become so overt that one has to wonder if it's simply that those who should be exposing it just can't bring themselves to look. But what of the hundreds of thousands of children who go missing each year the world over, who don't have the option to look away?
So there's clearly a control system with these guys that are in the hierarchy, however far up they are. But we're looking at the ritual child abuse here, and the number of children that go missing each year is staggering and terrifying for most people. Won't want to even look at it. What is going on here in terms of all these children that go missing the world over, and the fact that it's been completely, like, one for want of a better word, buried?
Well, I remember I was in the United States, would be in the late 1990s, and I met a lady, lovely lady, who, it's a long story, but her husband had been murdered, and she was, and he were looking after two children who they were going to foster. They were fostering with a view to becoming their official, mum and dad.
Yeah.
And soon as her husband was murdered, someone came along, and basically those children were taken away. And of course the lady was distraught and started on a campaign of trying to understand what was going on. And I did as much as I could to help her at the time. And where it led was the fact that, these children were taken away by the cult, right? And what it involved me doing one day was calling the federal government in America and asking them how many children go missing in America every year. And what they told me was they didn't keep the figures. I would have to call every state to find out, right? They probably could have told me how many cars went missing, but not children. Yeah. So I started. I was ringing state after state after state. And by the time I got to 10 to 12, the number was off the Richter scale. This is the illusion. The illusion that only those children that appear on the news as going missing and a big search is going on, only that number represents how many children go missing in the world every day. Nothing like. The number is absolutely fantastic. And I'm talking to Credo Mutwa one day, the Zulu shaman, and he was telling me how they, in his village in South Africa, they had a network of men who were basically policing the disappearance of children, that people would kind of start to appear. A lot of them were Chinese, he said, funnily enough. And he said what would then happen is children would start to go missing. And this got to such a degree that they put this network of men in the village together to basically act like a police force to protect the kids.
Right.
So what I'm saying is this is happening all over the world.
Yeah.
So the question is, where are these children ending up?
Sure. Yep.
Now, it's very clear from my research over the years that a lot of them end up in underground bases. And what are underground bases?
In the UK and US?
Well, around the world,
Yeah.
but America massively. What are underground bases? I did a lot of research on this a long time ago, and especially when I was traveling around America, I met a lot of people that had experience of these bases. And what they are is they go down, some of them go down miles,
Yep.
right? And we were talking technology that's never seen in the public arena. Each step down the underground base, each level, you need a higher security clearance than the level above. So you've got people working at these bases in the upper levels of the base who haven't got a clue what's going on down there. This is classic. I mean, what is a secret society? Levels of degree. Degree of what? Degree of knowledge. That's how it works.
Yep.
And so it gets to the point, and you know, I've talked to people who've worked in these bases and have done this. It gets to the point where the level of security is so fierce that they're weighed in and they're weighed out.
Yep.
And if you weigh a fraction different to how you weighed when you arrived for work, they want to know what you're taking out that you didn't bring in, right?
Yeah.
And so some people have gone public over the years in what they saw in these underground bases. And they say they saw children in cages.
Yeah.
I know that you've done interviews with people who talk about how they operated in the military in underground bases and they saw children in cages.
I have it.
And I have met many people around the world, particularly in America, who've described the same thing. And not only that, whereby there are hybrids between animals and people, hybrids between reptilians and people in these really low levels of the underground bases. And if you go low enough in the major ones, they open out into cavern systems, which is where they interact with reptilians and these non-human entities.
Yeah.
And from these this interaction comes this high technology that gets played out into the public arena and that we're seeing taking over human society now. And a lot of the children end up in these underground bases. And let's just say these entities use them as food and leave it at that in people's imagination. And then you've got other children who disappear, who end up in the global paedophile rings. Now,
So what do you mean by a global paedophile ring? People often think that it's just like, you know, Bob down the road who's a bit dodgy, but there's an actual network here which ties into the compromat
Yeah.
of the likes of Jimmy Savile and Epstein and these guys that are compromising other people to do certain things. This is a big part of how they get done what they need to get done.
well, I've said over the years that Satanism and paedophilia, those rings interconnect.
Yeah.
They don't interconnect, you know, necessarily at the level of some bloke on the council estate, but they interconnect at the controlling core. Why is that? Well, we come back to energy. We talked about the sacrificial rituals where these entities are feeding off the energy of the terror. But paedophilia is also about taking energy, particularly of children, in the same way. So you'll have a paedophile who is sexually abusing a child, and that paedophile will be possessed by one of these non-human entities operating from another reality. And what happens is, through the conduit of the paedophile, the entity is drawing off the energy of the child. Now, I've not just heard this once or twice. I've not just heard this in the West. I've heard this all over the world, where you've got shamans who talk about the fact that you have a life force, energetic field, and after this paedophilia takes place, that life force is greatly diminished. It's a lot less bright than it was before,
Yeah.
a lot less vibrant than it was before, because it's been taken. You've been energy vampired, right? And this is what paedophilia is massively about. Not only that, you see, the reason they sexually abuse children that they want to use in mind control programs like the infamous MK Ultra in America is because whether they're boys or whether they're girls, the foundation of paedophilia is anal sex. And if you look at the impact of this, it sends a shock up the spine and it hits the brain.
Right.
And the brain basically fractures in terms of the way that it processes
Like a honeycomb.
information. Yeah.
Yeah.
It fractures. And they do that. And once that fracturing has taken place, these kids become much more open to mind control.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So with the royals, just to pick up on what you said there, you said vampire, and obviously you've got the royal connection to Vlad the Impaler. These hybrid bloodlines, like the British royals, like these black nobility bloodlines, are we looking at bloodlines that are more easily possessed because they have a resonance with maybe an off-world entity? These are different types of people. You're looking, they call them blue bloods, obviously. So are we looking at a different hybrid bloodline here? Because
We are talking about hybrid bloodlines, and this is a very important area. Why do over the centuries, over the thousands of years, why does royalty and aristocracy consider itself genetically superior?
yeah,
Because they are a different genetics. They are hybrids. You can have dual information fields. Imagine two Wi-Fi fields. Example, one has the human
yep,
coding, one has the reptilian coding. That's the hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
They're two fields of information. So what happens is the hybrids put forward the human field most of the time. all the time.
How do they control that?
Except when they're in a safe position. Well, that's an interesting point. A lot of it is just the way that the whole thing's designed, but it's also about a mental state as well.
Right.
That gets very deep, how they do that. But so most of the time, any observer is decoding the information field, like the Wi-Fi field, into what appears to be a human. But behind that is, say, a reptilian or a non-human field. And sometimes often in the rituals, that people have explained this to me many times, how people have shifted into reptilians, not least the royals, in these rituals, in these satanic rituals. That other part of the hybrid field becomes the dominant one. Now, when that becomes the dominant one, any observer is now decoding that, and they see a reptilian.
Yep.
And if you're observing someone who is shape-shifting from the human field to the non-human field, the reptilian field, say, to the observer, it will appear that that person has just gone from a solid human to a solid reptilian form. That's what it will appear to the observer.
Yeah.
But that's not what's happened. There's been an energetic information field shift, and so what the observer is decoding changes from a human to a reptilian. Over the years, I've met people who've taken part in these rituals, and one of them with the royals, the Queen Mother as was at the time, and they've described how they shift within the ritual, because in the ritual, of course, first of all, it's a completely different vibrational frequency environment in which this shift becomes very simple to do. I remember when this started for me was in America. When I first went to America, I was talking to no one. But in a period of 15 days, as I traveled around America, a different place every day, I met 12 different people who told me the same story of seeing someone who appeared to be human shift into a non-human form.
Amongst the rocks on the Matopo Mountains, you find a species of lizard which you don't find anywhere in Africa or the world. A species of lizard which responds to the call of a human being.
Isn't it a staggering coincidence that Cecil Rhodes, one of the greatest Illuminati frontmen, perhaps certainly of modern times, who did so much to imprison Africa, should choose to be buried at the point where this is all going on?
When you stand back and take a look at this, it all appears to be so blatant and out in the open. So why is it that the vast majority of the world population remain oblivious to what is going on? Even the events of 2019 and the entire COVID scam failed to wake billions of people up. It really does appear that we live in two worlds, a two-world order of those who can see and of those who are sleepwalking into oblivion. How much longer can this carry on?
So we've covered a vast depth of this satanic ritual, but we've got one more to look at. This guy, William Tompkins, and what he says about these reptilians and underground bases was absolutely outstanding and stunning.
Yeah, William Tompkins was an American aerospace engineer who wrote a book long after I started talking about the reptilians. It was another one of those confirming pieces of information that I tend to come across. He said he was based at the big naval base in America in San Diego,
Yeah.
and that he operated in basically secret organizations, and that all this stuff about the reptilians was true, and that there was a group within the reptilians known as the Draconians, that are basically reptilian royalty.
And we get Dracula from that. And
Dracula and all of that stuff. And of course, the origin of Dracula, or the blueprint of Dracula, was a man called Vlad the Impaler, in what we now call Romania, and he is an ancestor of Prince Charles, the current king of England, which it all kind of fits.
He's quite proud of that as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he is proud of that, yeah. He goes there quite often, really. He got property there. So, what I've seen over the years, and it's kind of step by step, more information, another source, and eventually it becomes this vast this vast network of information that's basically pointing in the same direction.
Yeah.
And that is that we are, as humans, living in a reality which is incredibly narrow. We have these entities that are manipulating to humans hidden, human society, to produce the low vibrational emotional and mental reactions to events that they create, situations they create, that feeds them. And so we live in two worlds in one world. One of the worlds is the global cult. A network of secret society is fiercely compartmentalized. So even within the cult, there's compartmentalization of knowledge. Like if you look at the Freemasons, you've got the 33 degrees of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, but the people at the bottom don't know what the people at the top know, and the people at the top don't know the levels above them. They don't even know exist, most of them. So it's all compartmentalization of knowledge. But at the inner core, this cult knows the nature of reality. It knows the game. It knows these entities are manipulating because it's representing them and working for them and with them. And it's passing on through the secret society network in this closed arena knowledge of A, the nature of reality, which is fundamental, and B, the agenda for humanity that's unfolding. And then there's this other world, which is the world that the human population live in. And what's happened is that world of the cult has created the sources of information that the population receives. So through the Rockefellers, for instance, in America, the American education system emerged. And it's the same around the world. And what's happened is, if you look at the world in general, the Western education model has been basically taken all over the world now. And so they control from the earliest age the information that we're receiving. This same cult owns the mainstream media. It owns now much of the alternative media. So they're controlling the sources of information. These sources are passing on what they need to know to manipulate the population. The population are suppressed in what they need to know to realize that this is actually happening, that they are being manipulated.
So what would you say the rituals of the elite are? It seems to encompass everything, but what would you say, if you were to say the rituals of the elite are? What would you say that sort of symbolises here for the maybe archons that are in a different realm?
Well, the rituals are A, to produce loosh from the population, and B, to create ritualistic behavior. Now, when Credo Mutwa, the Zulu shaman, said to me so long ago, if you want to understand the Illuminati, study the reptile. The reptilian mind is very ritualistic. It goes through this recurring sequence. Because I say it's AI, it's like a software program. It's just a repeating program. And what they're doing is seeking, going back to Don Juan Matus, they gave us their mind. The whole idea has been to turn humans, ultimately, potentially infinite awareness, all that is, has been, and ever can be, infinite potential, infinite possibility, into this ritualistic mind that just goes through this repeating behavior. And if you look at human society from that perception, that perspective, the whole of human society is a ritual.
Yep.
Look at people's lives. How many times is next Monday not going to be the same as this Monday? Next Friday not going to be the same as this Friday? Mm-hmm. You know, in the great body of the population, the great billions of the population, it's a constant regurgitation of the same behavior. I mean, the whole thing's a ritual. Even yes sir, no sir, do what I say. Yes sir, no sir, do what I say is a ritual. It's all ritualistic. The point being that if we're going to stop it, we have to stop acquiescing. We have to stop acquiescing to that which we know is we shouldn't be acquiescing to.
Yeah.
Because you know, you've got three groups of people in human society. You've got those that just unquestioningly obey without any thought. They just obey. What authority says, we better do it.
Yep.
Oh, we've come up from on high, I don't know, we better do it. Then you've got the next level, or the next group, that knows it shouldn't be doing it. It knows there's a scam going on, at least to some level. But it obeys and acquiesces anyway because it fears the consequences of not acquiescing. During the COVID period, you saw that absolutely crystal clear. The unquestioning group, and that which I can see it's a scam, but I don't want the consequences of challenging it. Then you've got the third group. And by the way, the first two groups, they've been responsible for every single tyranny in history.
Yep.
Because tyrannies aren't imposed by fascists or communists. There's never enough of them. They're imposed by the population acquiescing to the fascists and the communists. That's how it works. And so then you've got the third group. And the third group says, I can see it's a scam, I'm not cooperating. I can see it's a scam and I'm not acquiescing. And that's the group that has ended every tyranny in history, because that's the group that started the process that's brought down the tyranny by simply saying no. And what we need, because you know the first group of unquestioning is probably a lost cause at this point, we need that middle group that can see it's a scam or levels of it, but are frightened of the consequences. They need to grow a pair. They need to grow a spine, and they need to join the group that says, I can see it and I'm not having it, I'm not cooperating with it. Because once that starts to happen, especially if people grasp the game that is being played. I mean, if you don't know how the game that's being played, the game's going to play you, because you're not going to be aware of the rules. Yeah. And what's happening. But if we can get more of that group to say no, then the house of cards comes down. Yeah. And if they don't, it won't. It's simple as that. It's just a choice.
There you go.
Can you cut there?
Perfect.
It doesn't get easier the further I run. It gets harder to carry the weight of what I've done. I am speaking from experience. I don't wanna run, run, I don't want to run no more. Seems to me a man can do a lot of thinking when he's staring down the barrel of a gun, and the devil's had his sights set on me since the day that I took sides with the sun. Now every morning I go to war with the ghosts I met the night before, trying to find the grace in my mistakes. And there's monsters beating